Stacey Abrams has announced she is again going to run for Georgia governor in 2022. This is actually sort of exciting. I have to tell you, I kind of like this. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution reporting Stacey Abrams is running for governor in 2022. She launched her campaign yesterday with a pledge to fight for economic equality and expand healthcare access, setting up a potential rematch against Republican Governor Brian Kemp in one of the nation's most competitive political battlegrounds. So what does that mean, potentially a rematch? Remember that there was this crazy situation where Stacey Abrams, Democrat, ran against Brian Kemp, Republican, in Georgia for the governorship, and Brian Kemp won. What was crazy about that race is that at the time, Brian Kemp was the Secretary of State of Georgia, meaning that Brian Kemp, as Secretary of State, was overseeing the election in which the same Brian Kemp, Republican candidate for governor, was a candidate. Absolutely insane. Allegations of foul play running rampant, and many concerns that it could be even worse this time because of something called SB 202, which we're going to talk about in a moment. Now, why is it a possible rematch against Brian Kemp for Stacey Abrams? Well, it's possible because first, Stacey Abrams has to win her Democratic primary in Georgia. And secondly, because Brian Kemp has to win his Republican primary. Now, you could say, David, both of those things are likely to happen. I wouldn't disagree with you, but we don't yet know for sure. Kemp has announced he's running for re-election. Now, it's cliche at this point to say it, but the outcome will likely depend on turnout, as it often does in these state races. And we now certainly have to talk about SB 202. SB 202 is a voting law. How can I even say? It's a voting rules law, comprehensive, that affects a bunch of different aspects of voting in the state of Georgia. For example, as of SB 202, which was passed after Stacey Abrams lost that race, the earliest voters can request mail-in ballots is 11 weeks before the election instead of 180 days. That's like less than half as much time. The final deadline to complete an application for a mail-in ballot has been moved earlier. Counties will start mailing out the absentee ballots about 3 weeks later than before, starting only 4 weeks before the election. So they're compressing and limiting the ways and schedules on which people can vote absentee and request those ballots. Requesting and returning a ballot will also be subject to new, stricter voter ID rules. There are changes to early voting, which in Fulton County, which is a key Democratic county, you will no longer be able to use one of two mobile voting buses in that county, which were purchased to help with long lines. Access to those is being restricted. So that's not good for Democrats. So the plus of this potential rematch between Stacey Abrams and Brian Kemp is Brian Kemp won't also be the Secretary of State running the election. That's good for Stacey Abrams. Not so good for Stacey Abrams is SB 202, which is a series of changes that on balance do not help. Forget about do not help, hurt Democrats, straight up hurt Democrats. I think Stacey Abrams is a great candidate, and one of the things she has going for her since she last ran are some major successes. When you look at the two, what was the date now? January 5th of this year, special Senate elections in which Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff won, defeating Republican incumbents. Stacey Abrams gets much of the credit for those wins, participating in massive voter registration efforts, successful ones at that. I think she's a very solid candidate. She speaks to voters in a way that is both relatable, but not from a condescending place, but also really clearly. In that sense, she's an interesting kind of has an interesting delivery and way that she relates to voters. So I'm very excited about this race. We've got the Texas gubernatorial race where Beto O'Rourke is running, and there's real questions as to whether he's the right candidate. I actually think that Stacey Abrams is the right candidate in Georgia, and we're going to be following that race very closely. The midterms are really shaping up to be very interesting. I was speaking to our YouTube rep yesterday, and I said, at first I didn't know from like a public interest standpoint how interested will our audience and the country be in these midterm elections. Now, as a lot of these specific races are starting to take shape, this could be one of the most followed midterm elections overall in a very, very long time. Let me know your thoughts. You can find me on Twitter at dpacman. Remember that December 14th at 6 p.m. Eastern, we'll be doing the next David Pakman Show Viewer Town Hall. It will be streaming live on our second YouTube channel, Pakman Live. Make sure you're subscribed there. We'll take a break and be back with much more after this.
One of our sponsors is Blinkist, who's been supporting the David Pakman Show longer than any other sponsor. Blinkist is the app that lets you listen to or read an entire nonfiction book in just 15 minutes. Blinkist is the way to absorb those books you can't make time for. Blinkist takes top nonfiction titles, pulls out the book's key takeaways and insights, and gives it to you in the form of a text or audio explainer that you can consume in 15 minutes. With Blinkist, now you actually do have time to learn about all the things you've been wanting to tackle. On the Blinkist app, I just listened to This Is Your Mind on Plants by the great Michael Pollan. Super interesting, the history of caffeine and so many other things. Blinkist has you covered on podcasts too. Blinkist takes long episodes of popular podcasts and distills them into audio you can listen to in 15 minutes. With Blinkist, you can become knowledgeable about so many different things. You can have conversations with people about more topics. Blinkist makes you more well-rounded. Try Blinkist for free and get 25% off a subscription. Go to Blinkist.com/Pakman. The link is down below.